Welcome to episode 50 of the 6-Star Business Podcast. It is January 2022 already. I'm your host, Aveline Clark, and in today's episode, I have a fabulous person as my co-host. I've got Greg Smith from Send Handwritten. He actually hails from the same town as me. We got introduced by my former co-host, Pete Daly-Dixon, from the other side of the world, and we happen to live a stone's throw from each other. So Greg is great. He is my co-host today. Now, our guest, we have one guest, Cam Fraser. What a fabulous, beautiful man. This conversation was not what I was expecting. In fact, when it was unfolding and at the end, I sat there really stunned and I was so grateful. Look, for whatever preconceived ideas you have about the work that Cam does, forget all of that, because what he's actually doing is helping men to be better versions of themselves. And he is 100% 6-star. I invite every person to listen to this episode, and I promise you, you will find something in it that is meaningful, that it will have moved you, that you will have learned from. And look, I just ask you to sit back open-mindedly, and I'm sure you will fall in love with Cam as a person just like I did. So enjoy it, and I look forward to your comments, to connecting with you and seeing you on the other side. Hello, welcome. Here we are at another 6-Star Business Podcast episode. You're here with me and my sidekick today, my co-host, Greg Smith. And how are you, Greg?
I'm very well, thanks, Av. And yourself?
I am fabulous. And we have one guest today. We've got Cam Fraser. How are you, Cam?
I'm doing good, nice and early, and I'm feeling fresh, so thanks for having me.
Awesome. It's so good to have you. So, yeah, our other guest couldn't make it, and here we are. It's a cozy 3, and I am very excited about this. Usually with our episodes, we have people from all over the world, and it's quite interesting as to where people are located. This is a unique episode in that Greg and I live a few streets away from each other. So we've never had that happen on the podcast before. So there we go. And Cam, to kick us off, it would be really awesome if you could share with our listeners a little bit about yourself. So where do you live in the world? Who do you serve? What do you like doing when you're not working? Or anything else to just share about who you are, because we're really keen to get to know you.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for inviting me to share. And I guess so my name's Cam, and I live in a place called Margaret River, which is about 4 hours south of Perth in Western Australia. It's a beautiful little coastal town. Currently, there's a lot of fires here, but most of the year it's really, really lovely. The work that I do is, so my title is I'm a men's sex coach, and the people that I serve, based on that title, are predominantly cisgender, heterosexual, white men. So people that share my lived experience, my demographic. So just straight white dudes, pretty much, is my demographic of men that I serve. And the way that I serve them as a sex coach is helping them either overcome sexual difficulties, whether it's a dysfunction like premature ejaculation and erectile dysfunction, or anorgasmia, or low libido, or whatever might be kind of going on for them in terms of a functional issue. But then on the flip side of things, the way that I serve the men that I work with as well is the guys that feel like they're just scratching at the surface of their sex life, and they feel like there's a lot more that they might not be experiencing. They've never had, we can speak a bit more into this, but a lot of guys feel like they've never really had very good sex education, and so they're not sure how to connect more intimately and more deeply with their partner. They feel like their relationship is maybe a bit stale and a bit stagnant, and they want to spice things up, and they want to kind of take things to that more deeper, intimate level. And so I work with those men as well. And then I do a lot of educating online. And I'm really passionate about that. I know you said, what am I passionate outside of my work? But I'm actually really passionate about my work. And I suppose I wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't so passionate about it. And it's really informed by my own lived experience. And I can speak more into that. But I've had my own kind of 10, 15-year journey of reclaiming my sexuality and exploring what that looks like for me, and trying to be a bit more of like a sexual role model for the men in my life. And so I suppose like that's my passion. But like outside of work, like I'm really passionate about reading. Like I love learning. I think I really value education. And so like there's a running joke with my friends asking me which academic journal article I've just recently read, because that's what I do in my spare time. I just go on to like PubMed and start to read all these random journal articles. So I'm really passionate about learning, and I'm also really passionate about my family as well. So I've just become a father 7 months ago, and finding that work-life balance and figuring out like what that looks like and the type of father that I want to be, and like the way that I want to raise my son with my beautiful partner. Just like really passionate about like, I've just been nerding out on like little books for my son, like to buy like stuff that, is really, really inclusive and diverse, and we're kind of teaching him to be bilingual as well. And so like just having all these things that, I never had when I was a kid, I suppose. And it's just been like really, really lovely to kind of step into the role of a father in like a really aware, and some might say kind of conscious or intentional way. So I'm really passionate about that, and being kind of an example for the other men in my life in that regard. So that's a little bit about me.
Wow, that's fabulous. And there's so much in there. And I love what you were saying right at the very end, how you're being conscious and intentional about your life. And you feel, it sounds like you're in this wonderful space of being able to be that way in your business and your home and your personal life. Would that be right?
Yeah, very much so. It's definitely been like something, if I reflect on like what I was originally doing as work, I was like just going down the pathway of, studying engineering at university, and I was just going to get like a well-paying job, and I was just going to go through the motions and get a mortgage and stuff that, I've got no animosity towards. But as soon as I kind of like had this idea of where my life was going, I was like, oh my God, I can't do that. Like, that's just not for me. I can't just go through the motions and just do what my parents expected of me, and just go and kind of live that very stereotypical kind of like Australian, life. And I was like, all right, I've got to do something about this. And when I was in university, I ended up, firstly studying engineering, and then I kind of was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. So I've got to figure out what it is that I want to do, and what it is that I'm really going to be interested in. And so that's where I ended up speaking to a career counselor, and they suggested that I do psychology. And so I ended up, switching degrees into psychology, and I ended up doing philosophy as well. And then had this real kind of spark kind of ignite in me, and be like, wow, this is like really amazing and profound. And I found it like really interesting. And so I kind of shifted directions at around like the age of, I must have been about like 19 years old, I suppose. And then from there, it's been a whole journey to navigate, working for myself, working in an industry that's like, there's not a lot of regulations, but also it's like weirdly regulated, like the sexuality industry. There's a lot of like trials and tribulations with regards to advertising and promoting, and then, codes of conduct and things like that. So it's all been, it's all been just like, there hasn't been a lot of, let's say, trailblazers in my industry, I suppose, especially here in Australia. It's quite a small community of people that work in the sexuality industry. And so when I was looking for people that I could use as examples, that I could hold up and admire in terms of like the work that I do, I haven't found a lot of people that do exactly what it is that I do. It's also a very female-dominated space as well, the sexuality space. And so in terms of like the men that are working in there, I haven't found a lot of men that do the same thing that I do. There's a lot of guys that work as like clinical therapists and things like that, but not a lot of men that work, at least in the higher kind of level, as a coach or someone who's not in that clinical space. And so it's just been me trying to figure it out as I go along, actually, for like the last 10 years. And so to speak into your question, it's been a very intentional, like I've explored some certain areas and then gone, okay, that's not for me. And so I've got to shift directions. And so definitely in my career, it's been I've been very aware and very mindful of like the direction that I'm taking my work and like the way that I present myself. I used to have long hair. I used to have long dreadlocks actually, and I used to have this big scraggly beard. And I used to wear like open flowing shirts and lots of mala beads and look the part of like the spiritual kind of yoga guy. And that was where I was at that time of my life, and that was the classes that I was teaching. I was teaching yoga and kind of tantra classes, but then, had this kind of realization that wasn't me. That wasn't as authentic as I could be. Like I was kind of doing that because that's what I'd seen other guys do, and so I was like, all right, what feels a bit more right for me, and that that looks like me cutting my hair and shaving my beard down at least a little bit. I still got a little bit of a beard, and putting some shirts on, putting some button-up shirts on, and trying to bring a bit more professionalism like decorum, I suppose, into my work. And so that was like a really intentional kind of pivot that I did. And yeah, I could keep waffling on, but I do the same thing in my life as well. Like I'm really intentional about the people that I hang out with, the food that we eat as well, like where we live. We really wanted to live down here in Mug River, and it took us a couple of years to get down here because the housing kind of market is a little bit tight. So we ended up moving into a bus, for example. We lived in a bus for 2 years that we built, and then we spent a year of that time in Margaret River in the community waiting for houses to come onto the market because we really wanted to live down here. And so we lived in the bus until that happened. So my partner and I are very intentional with like what it is that we're doing with our family and with our life as well. So yeah, that was a bit of a long-winded answer to your question, I think, but yeah, you're 100% right. It's very intentional.
So Cam, what's the distinction between the sex industry and the sexuality industry? Are they one and the same, or is there a distinction?
So there's probably a little bit of a distinction, but they're kind of adjacent. I kind of think of it. So like the sex industry would be, at least my understanding, my definition of that would be people that work as maybe sex workers, or people that work as adult toy retailers, or people that work in the pornography industry, for example. So that would be like the sex industry, if I was to kind of put a label on it. The broader term of the sexuality industry would kind of encompass that, as well as the people that work as maybe sex therapists, as sex coaches, sex educators, maybe people that are working as relationship counselors as well. Like that's part of a relationship is sex and sexuality. So we've got like this. I'd say like the sexuality industry is kind of the umbrella term for a lot of different people that work in that space, and then the sex industry, more specifically, maybe being a bit more a specific term, kind of referring to those people that I mentioned, like sex workers and pornographers and things like that. So there's a lot of crossover. That, like if we think of that Venn diagram, it's quite a big crossover in terms of the spaces that people hold.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And obviously for our listeners, this is probably not a topic they were thinking they were going to hear about. But the thing is, we're all people, and this is part of life, and it's a really important thing. And what I really admire, Cam, in part, when you were sharing your story, is you've obviously come up against, I guess, situations, or like being at university as an engineering student, and honouring the place inside of you that says, this is not me. And there was something deeper inside of you that drove you forward to seek out what me is and where your purpose can be activated. Would that be
Yeah,
a fair explanation?
very much so. I suppose, like, if I share a little bit of my own like personal experiences when I was younger, like I was part of like the university sport team. I was a soccer player, so I was part of like I actually went to university in America as well, so I was part of like the American locker room kind of culture. It's quite, some might say, misogynistic. It was quite toxic. I was in a pretty bad mental health space as well. I was drinking a lot as a student athlete. Like I was really playing up the Australian drinking kind of larrikin persona and I mean, I'll be as blunt as possible here. Like the reason why I was doing that is because that was what was getting me laid, essentially. Like it was very much like young American college women loved Australian men, and so that was I just played onto that. And so I was like, had this really negative and detrimental approach to sexuality and my masculinity as well, and who I was. Right? Like I was being super inauthentic. I was like really pretending to be someone who I wasn't. I was really performing my masculinity, performing like who I was as a man, and so it was very serendipitous. I actually hurt my back. I actually fractured my lower spine, and part of my clinical rehabilitation was to do Pilates and to go see specialists and to go and do all these different modalities. And so my physiotherapist and my Pilates teacher, they said you should probably do some yoga to supplement the rehab. And so I was introduced to yoga. Again, this is around the age of 19 years old. At the same time that I was transitioning into studying psychology and philosophy, and so I went from this space of being like really frustrated and angry and anxious and tense in my body. When I was like drinking a lot and I was being bullied, but also I was a bully. As part of that kind of like really unhealthy male space as well. For men that are listening, they'll probably recognize what it is I'm talking about here. But there was a lot of like, it was quote unquote banter, but it was very hostile, and you kind of took the piss out of your mates, and your mates took the piss out of you, and it was just like, it wasn't really super healthy. And I went from kind of that space where I was also having really shitty sex with these young women because I was concerned about my performance, right? To then like injuring myself, really hurting myself, and through my rehabilitation, starting to tune into my body for the first time ever. Like I'd started to like learn how to breathe. I'd started to relax. I'd started to like stretch and open up and release tension and release tightness at a physical level, but then also started to process emotions that were starting to come up. So I was given time and space to kind of talk to people, and I eventually ended up seeing a counselor and a therapist, and so just started just rewriting scripts around what it meant to be a man, what it meant to be a sexual man, like where I'd gotten these ideas of masculinity and sexuality from. And so I did this work at a really young age, and I was like, wow, it's transformed like who I am. And I started having better sex, like to speak into that. But I also like started interacting with the men in my life differently. I started speaking out against the guys who were belittling others and bullying others and saying homophobic or misogynistic slurs in the locker room. I started kind of speaking up, and I lost friends. I went through a transition of time where I felt quite lonely because my friend group didn't want to hear what I was talking about. They didn't want to, they didn't care. And so I went through this period of transition of looking for new people in my life. Like I said before, I was really intentional about finding a new group of friends that aligned with my values. And so I kind of had this epiphany of like, wow, this has like really transformed my life, and why can't it transform others? Like this intersection between talk therapy, like psychology and counseling, and like just working on your sexual scripts, and then also like the body-based therapy, which is like the massage and the yoga and the Pilates and the physiotherapy. It's like a really beautiful crossover where those two areas overlap, which is where sex coaching for me is a really powerful tool, because it allows you to draw on the talk therapy modalities as well as the bodywork modalities and work with people, and specifically the people that I work with is work with men in the same way that I was worked with, and I just didn't really realize it at the time. And so like the kind of 10-year journey that I went on, I condensed down into like some really potent, powerful couple of months with guys. And we do a whole bunch of like body-based stuff. And also we do a bunch of like talk therapy-based stuff, because I've got a background in psychology and counseling. So I feel like I went off tangent a little bit there with your question, but like that's kind of where this idea comes from, is like my own lived experience, I suppose, and what I've gone through, and that seems to like really resonate with a lot of other men, because I feel like regardless of your socioeconomic status or demographic, like we share pretty similar concerns and anxieties about sexuality as men. We have similar concerns regardless of where we grew up and who we are. So it tends to be quite well received when I speak to guys about sexuality stuff.
So Cam, when you dig through the fog of all of that stuff, the talking therapy and the things that come up for men in the talking component, and you clear the fog physiologically and you bring those two things together, is there an archetype 6-star male persona? And if there is, like, what is that archetype that you're aspiring to, or that you're helping your clients dig towards aspiring to?
Yeah, so I love this idea of there being like this 6-star persona, right? And I love the concept of the podcast as well. And so like if I'm thinking in terms of clients, like how do I get my clients to be to get to that point where they're like kind of maximizing their potential and being their best self, right? Which is kind of what like 6-star represents to me. Is like there's a couple of different levels that I kind of work on with my guys, and like the way that I integrate these is kind of dependent upon each individual, but kind of work on their relationships essentially. And it's like there's these 3 core relationships that we work on, and bringing kind of intentionality, like we were saying before, and reverence and respect and even like sacredness, if they want to go to that kind of more esoteric level, into these 3 relationships is the way that I kind of help them get to that 6-star mentality or to that kind of optimized mentality. And those 3 relationships are relationship with themselves. Like, what does their relationship with their body look like? What does their relationship with their mental health look like? What does their relationship with their sexual expression and sexuality look like? And can they bring some intentionality into that? Then the second relationship, and it's kind of chronological in this order, the second relationship is with community or with something that's kind of greater than themselves. So they've kind of like gone inwards, and now it's time to kind of expand and go outwards. And it's almost like, it's almost a little bit metaphysical here. It's like, what's your relationship with God or with spirit or with, whatever kind of transcends the individual, and whether that's community or the planet or the environment or whatever it is. It's like just a relationship with something higher. And then the third relationship then is with someone else, is with the other, is with another person, right? And it's kind of recognizing that via that second relationship, which is with like the world or with your community or with spirit or spirituality, that you've got this connection to this other person. And what is your relationship like with, it could be an intimate partner, it could be a bunch of casual partners, it could be family members, but what's your relationship like with the other or with the other people? And what does that look like? And can you bring some intentionality and some, it's a lot of communication skills really when we do that work. But when we start to hone in on each of those 3 relationships, and some guys need more work on one than the other and vice versa. But when we start to like really bring mindfulness and intentionality and skills, like it's a lot of skill building, like, learning how to communicate, learning how to, how to do certain things sexually or how to, do a particular practice. But once we start to work on those 3 things, and it takes a couple of months to like really start to navigate where they're at and get some kind of positive snowball effect happening. There's a lot of resistance to the work that I do with guys. A lot of guys are very stubborn and stuck in their ways. And so it takes a little while to kind of get over those first couple of hurdles. But once we do, that's when I start to see things like really shift and change for them in their life. They have a newfound kind of vigor for life. They kind of step into a new role as a partner or as a father or as a lover or as a man in their circle of friends. And that's where I start to see like that kind of 6-star mentality, I suppose, or that archetype come up, where these guys like really take charge of their life and stop kind of going through the motions, and they start actually like going, okay, how can I be a role model? How can I be an example? How can I show up in a way that's like authentic and congruent and genuine for me? And for some guys, that looks like being really open about their sexuality and talking about it quite openly like I do. For other guys, it's not. It's a much more private thing, but their private sexuality expression really shifts and changes, and they become a lot more comfortable with it. They become a lot more honest with it, and they become a lot more able to communicate with their partners about it. But it definitely is this kind of radical transformation that I start to see. And that's what I really think is epitomizing of that kind of 6-star mentality, I suppose, if that makes sense.
Cool.
I love that, Cam. As you were talking, I just got like this little, like, I was just so excited because everything you were speaking about, I've heard, others talk about as well, but in a different way or a different context, as in business setting, right? But what you start with is the self. And it always starts with the self, doesn't it? You cannot be 6-star unless you actually go inward and do that inner work. So for me, when you're speaking, I'm thinking, a little tagline came to me. It was, or a little throwaway line, which was, it's not about the sex. You're helping these men become the best for themselves. inwardly and then outwardly, and then that connection with, like you said, the world, something bigger, the community, and it's not just about the sex at all. If and I guess that's why you're here on this podcast. If someone said, yeah, I'm a sex coach and I'm just going to help you, get a great outcome in the bedroom, and focus on the physical only, it is extremely one-dimensional.
Yep, there's plenty of people that offer that, right? There's plenty of people that just work in that kind of physical space, which is, I mean, it's needed and necessary. But I was like, well, I've got a background in self-development and psychology and philosophy, and I want to really tap into those things and share my wisdom that I have because of the privileged education that I've had with regards to those things. And so that's what I bring into my work. And I think guys seek me out for that. It's a little bit more of a holistic approach. And it's also a bit more of a professional approach as well. Like some of the guys that are doing just the purely physical stuff are, they maybe don't have a background in counseling, or they don't have a background in mental health. They don't have a background in sexology as well, which is what I've studied at postgraduate level. And they are the more like, open shirted, mala bead wearing, kind of long beard, long hair type of guys who offer that kind of just the physical side of things. And I wanted to represent, like, I mean, first I wanted to represent myself, but I wanted to represent like the sexuality industry, right? Like we were speaking about before. I wanted to represent it in a different way. Like I didn't want to just be another cookie cutter guy who had long hair. Like I said, I did that, and it wasn't me. And so I wanted to really like bring a bit more of like that professionalism and education and understanding to an industry that's sorely lacking it, I think, especially at like the mainstream layperson level, at the really like upper echelon of academia, where you've got the clinical therapists and you've got your people like Esther Perel, for example, like that are really like the high end, well-known public speakers as well. Have like there's a lot of professionalism there, but when you get to the kind of like everyday person, the people who you're going to go and reach out for work, right? Everyone can't go and see Esther Perel, for example, but a lot of people come and see someone who's a bit more accessible to them. That's where we get like a lot of cookie cutter kind of practitioners, I suppose, with not a lot of like experience, or not a lot of like, maybe a lot of personal experience, but not a lot of like educational experience, I suppose. And so I wanted to really bring that into the industry and make it a bit more respectable and make it a bit more well received. And so part of that has been like me going on to national radio, for example, and writing articles for magazines, and being a person who like journalists can contact as well, and speaking about things in a bit more of a I don't know what the word is, like professional is just the word that keeps on coming back to mind, but in a more of that kind of 6-star kind of way, right? Rather than it being just like this really crude and focusing only on the sex, and making it just like really sensationalized. I try and bring a little bit more depth to kind of the conversations that people are having around sexuality and masculinity, and that's been like a really it's been an interesting journey, because some people still don't take the sexuality industry very seriously, even though 99% of people have sex and express their sexuality in certain ways, and yet this whole industry is like swept under the rug and we pretend that it's not there. So I'm trying to bring a bit more awareness to that space as well.
So when you think about the most effective and authentic ways to get and hold the attention of your prospects, so people that you would like to impact and therefore you make an income from, what are the barriers to you getting out there and getting the word out, and how do you go to market with something that is so controversial historically?
Yeah, so this is a massive one, and I suppose like to weave a couple of threads into here. The first is like I do the work on myself first, right? Like we were speaking just before about like it not being about the sex, it being about the self and transforming the self. So I start there. I start with like, who am I? How am I showing up in the world? Like, what does that look like? And like I said a couple of times, can I be a role model and an example? So I start at that space and kind of model the work that I do. I like to use the word I embody the work. I'm not an armchair philosopher. I don't just read a book and then start to talk about something. I really experiment and do it, at my personal level and explore it, and then start to talk about it from that space of lived experience. So that's the first kind of strategy that I employ. It comes across as a bit more authentic and genuine. The other, the major barrier, I suppose, to entry for men. So the bane of my life is trying to get men to do this work. Like my workshops that I do, I can sell out a women's workshop and get 50 women come to a workshop. When it comes to doing the same workshop for men, I'll struggle to get seven or eight guys. And I think there's like this stigma around men and sexuality, which is a big barrier for my particular work as a men's sex coach. There's a bit more maybe acceptance for women to explore their sexuality, especially like in a bit more of a public setting as well, to go to a women's workshop to talk about sensuality and sexuality and relationships in that kind of public sphere, where you've got like 50 other women there and you're connecting. There's a bit more encouragement, I suppose, for women as well to be open and to talk and to be in those spaces. I think that's a pretty safe generalization to make. And on the flip side of that, there's not a lot of encouragement for men to talk about their feelings and to talk about their sexuality with other men, right? I remember when I first started doing this publicly and openly with other guys, I'd get this very stereotypical, like slurs and teasing and ridiculing, saying that I was weird or that I was creepy or that I was, some guys, still call me gay, right, as a homophobic slur. And so there's this stigma attached to men talking about their feelings in general, but also their sexuality at a more specific level. So when it comes to my work, I think one of the reasons why is because like men are expected to be the knowledgeable, active participants in sex, right? Men are supposed to know what they're doing, and even though we've got no one tells us, we're just expected to know. And so then if a guy reaches out to me for work, at some level, he's admitting that he doesn't know everything, that he doesn't exactly know what he's doing. And so there's this kind of like admittance to self of like, okay, I need help. And, and we know like guys are notoriously bad at seeking out help in general for medical reasons. But then also when it comes to sexuality, there's that extra layer of stigma and self-doubt and scripts that are going on there that need to be challenged. So that's one of my barriers, is kind of breaking those things down. And so the way that I do that is at a like social media level. I just talk about that. I pretty much exactly what I just shared with you. I just share online, so it becomes part of people's awareness. So they go, oh, that actually does sound a lot like me. Oh, maybe I am not reaching out for help because I have that story, and like so it starts to get the ball rolling. So I talk a lot about those things, cultural impacts of of our ideals of masculinity and our ideals of sexuality. I really name those at a kind of social media level and try to speak into them. Another barrier is the advertising and the promotion side of things. So I have actually a lifetime ban from Facebook and Instagram of advertising. I'm not allowed to advertise anymore, and I've taken it up with the teams, the Facebook and Instagram teams. They said, no, there's no further action you can take. Your account has been locked and it'll be locked indefinitely, and there's nothing else you can do. So I was like, oh, okay. And that stemmed from me trying to advertise, I suppose, a couple of years ago when I was still doing tantra and yoga kind of stuff, and using the word tantra in my promotions and using the word sex and pleasure in my promotions. And Facebook and Instagram don't like that, so they crack down on it, and then they put a full ban on my account. And so there's a lot of other sexuality educators and people in the sex industry who are very similar similar positions, who have no access to advertising on social media, are not allowed to. There's also like, even when we're not doing paid advertising, I get a lot of posts on social media deleted, for example, like removed. If I speak about a certain sexual act, or if I share I try and share artwork. I try and share like penis related artwork, because I think there's a sorely lacking representation of like just different types of penises out in the wild, I suppose. A lot of the representation around penises just comes from pornography, which is very skewed. And so it creates these unrealistic expectations about what a penis should look like and what it should do. And so I try and counter that by sharing artistic depictions of penises. But all of those posts get removed, at least very recently anyway, by Instagram and Facebook, for example. And so I'm at risk of having my account deleted. And so it's a very common thing for a lot of people in the sexuality space to kind of experience is censorship, essentially, is what's kind of happening there. And there's reasons why, like I understand the Foster and Sester regulations that kind of came out of America and how those are impacting social media. And so I'm across the reasoning behind it. Like I know why. And so there's been pushes for sexuality educators to kind of create their own platform or to find platforms that are less rigorous in terms of their content removal, I suppose. The problem is when you get onto those platforms, other really questionable content is also there, right? Because it's not being removed as often. And so you end up in this really unfortunate position of okay, well, you don't get censored, but then also all these other people that are saying some pretty hateful stuff also don't get censored as well. And it's like you're sharing a platform with them and it becomes, I know I don't really like that because I don't want to be associated with people that are spewing some pretty toxic stuff. So you're kind of in a bit of a catch-22 there. And then there's the stigma, right? There's the social stigma of people still think that I work as a sex worker. They still think that I have sex with my clients, and that's something that I get on a weekly basis as someone kind of making that assumption, or thinking that I thinking that I have an OnlyFans account, or thinking that I work in pornography. They think I've got videos somewhere that they can go and watch, and it's that's not what I do, right? And there's no shade on people that do that, but that's not what my profession is. And so I have to do educating to people about what sex coaching is, right? Because people don't know, and so they can't reach out to me and do this work if they don't even know that it exists as an option. And so there's a general education there around what is available to people. You don't just have to go and see a sex therapist. People think I'm a sex therapist as well, and I've worked as a therapist, but I don't actually work as a sex therapist anymore. And so they're like, okay, so what's the difference between a sex therapist and a sex coach? And so I have to do some educating around that and how I can help them in a different way. So that's another barrier as well. It's just people just don't know. There's not a lot of accessibility or education around the sexuality industry. It's very murky. And so people have a lot of connotations about who's in the industry and what it entails and things like that as well. So that's another barrier to speak into those kind of four major things.
Wow, really is the road less traveled.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a question just on what you've just been talking about. Have you ever tried to go and sort of talk about or advertise around, just not using the sex as the outcome, but it's more about men, feeling better and showing up in the world in a different way? Have you tried doing that? Does it work?
I personally haven't been able to do that because I don't have the option of doing paid advertising anymore. But I do know of other people that do similar work to me who have done that. And the way they advertise is they take out any mention of sexuality and any mention of pleasure and any mention of sex and sexual practices. And they talk about the program that they're offering, for example, and how it changes their relationship with their partners, how it changes their relationship with their family, how they become a better man, things like that. So the language has to be shifted, right? And there's people, I know there's copywriters out there and people that work as kind of marketers specifically for people in the sexuality space to help them kind of write copy that's appropriate, that won't get flagged. And the same thing with images as well, using particular images on your paid advertising on social media. And then there's also the page that it links to. So maybe, I'm not sure if people will know this, but if when you're doing paid advertising on social media, the review team will not only look at the copy and the image, but also look at the link that you get sent to when you click on that ad. And so if the link that you get sent to has sex and pleasure and images and stuff on it, based on your work, then you'll get flagged. And so there's usually a good strategy to have a bridging page. So you link to just kind of like a page that just says, hey, thanks for clicking, like click through again to get to my course or to get to my program. So there's no like mention of sex and pleasure and all that stuff on the page that you link to, but then you go through that link to get to the next page, which is where your course or your offering is. And so like that's a strategy that I know other people have employed, and it's worked for them. But you run the risk. Like you can hide it as much as you want, but if like the review team is really trying to crack down on it, they'll crack down on you, and you'll get banned, I suppose, or you have a temporary ban at least. So, but there's strategies around it. But so to speak into what you're saying, and I know some people have and have had some success with it. But yeah, my like social media experience and like the way that I promote myself has been pretty much organic. Like it was several years ago where I got the ban. So I've just done advertising just via like word of mouth or just like sharing about an experience that I've had and saying, hey, if you have the same experience and you want to work through it, then you can come and do some work with me. And just kind of like just putting myself out there, really, just through brand exposure. That's been my strategy for getting my name and my work out there. It's just going on podcasts, going on radio, putting myself out into situations where I'm a public speaker as well, or I get invited to a workshop, and that's been my way of advertising. It's all organic, free range advertising. It's nothing paid, unfortunately. I wish I could, but not for me.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. You don't want to be tarnished by association, and it is that it's so regulated in that advertising arena, which is a pity, and yet it's forced you to go out there and be yourself in these other free, organic channels, and people want authenticity, don't they? So it's actually forced you to be more authentic and show up in the world in your authentic way, tell your story, which a lot of other business owners are very uncomfortable to do. They'll prefer to go and pay for an ad, right? Right, Greg? And they'll go, oh, I need to market, I need to get some new leads and sales. Let's just go and buy some ads. Let's just go on and do that. Oh, what about your personal brand strategy? Oh, no, that feels really uncomfortable. No, that means I'd have to actually, what, you mean put my face out there? No, oh, I mean, some of the conversations I have with my clients, it's very much around that. And yet your journey, and by necessity, your personal brand has been the number one main strategy for getting yourself out there and using that personal brand and the different channels that allow you to speak about your story and who you are and how you show up in the world has been the success for you, as in the right path. And I applaud that. It's
thanks so
fabulous.
much. I was just going to say, I am my brand, right? Like I work under the company name Cam Fraser. That's my business name, and I'm a sole trader, and so like I am my business. And so like if I'm and this has been like something for me to personally navigate. Like if I'm having a slow week, or if I'm feeling pretty shitty, or if I'm like not like feeling really passionate about something because something else in my external life has happened. Like that impacts my business, right? Because I am my business. Like I work directly with people, and I run my social media accounts, for example. So my online presence is just based on me. And so like I try to be authentic in that, right? So if something has popped up in my life that people don't see online, then I'll usually speak into that, right? And I try and keep some privacy, and there's some things that I don't share, but that'll influence the way that I am talking to people, and the way that I'm showing up online, or even my clients. Like if I'm working one-on-one with clients and something's happened outside of that kind of practitioner-client relationship, I'll kind of name that and I'll own it and be like, hey, I'm a little bit off today because this has kind of happened, and I won't give them too many details, but I'll just say like, this has kind of happened for me, and I'm here, I'm present with you, I'm showing up. I just want to show up as authentically as possible, and I won't try and put on anything, because I think that does a disservice to my clients when they don't see that I'm actually a real human being. And so I kind of take that same approach to social media as well. Like if something vice versa, if something I'm really passionate about and I've just watched a documentary and it's just really lit up something in me and I want to talk about it, then I'll also do that as well. And I'll kind of pursue my interests in terms of what I talk about on social media. And that has been an interesting journey because I've kind of gone more from the physical side of things, right? I was talking about like 20 tips to help you last longer in bed, which is just like very stock standard, cookie cutter content, because there's only so many things that you can do, right? There's no new things under the sun when it comes to, physical things. We've only got so many things. But I've started being more interested in like the cultural aspects and the sociological aspects of sexuality, and speaking about like things that I see in pop culture and media, and kind of offering some critiques from that perspective. And so that transition from like talking only about physical things to now talking a bit more about cultural things and sexuality in a more broader context has, I've gotten some backlash from people online as well. People have very strong opinions about sex and sexuality, right? Especially when it comes to our cultural understanding of it and our societal understanding of it. So when I start to talk about that online, it's very, very simple to just do a post about, the top 20 things to do to last longer in bed. No one has any arguments about that. When I start talking about like what it means to be a man and what it means to be a sexual man, people have some very strong opinions and start to share that. And so we start to, I've started to see, at least anyway, a shift in the type of dialogue and the type of responses that I'm getting online. And as I try and put myself out there more and reach a bit more of a mainstream audience, I'm starting to get, obviously starting to get more positive responses, but also starting to get more negative responses as well, of people like really pushing back against it and being, just your typical online troll kind of people who are like looking to pick a fight and things like that. So that's been an interesting space as well to kind of navigate, is like you're talking about sex and sexuality and masculinity and some pretty like taboo laden and heavy subjects in a public forum where people have very strong opinions about it, and in that kind of online marketplace of ideas, right, where you've got a little bit of anonymity and you've got your keyboard warriors kind of coming out, that people aren't afraid to share some pretty nasty stuff with you. So like that's also something that I've been journeying through in the last kind of year or so as I've been stepping more into that role. So that's been quite interesting.
Yeah, wow. I'm sure that what you've just shared, our listeners can really relate to, and I hope that those listening have heard what you've said, Cam, and can really apply that to their own self and their own business in terms of not being afraid. So many of us present or carry out the steps we think that is acceptable to the society or the market. We're not people can be very guarded in so many respects. And if there's ever a wonderful example of using authenticity of self to build a personal brand and speak to your market, it's your story and it's your example, which I really applaud and I love. So thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for listening.
I have a little question. It's sort of been sitting here since this earlier on, when you shared your journey. Was there a point in time, a conscious point in time, where you said, I realise the path I'm going on is going to be fraught with challenges and I'm going to look like the different guy. I'm going to be seen as different and it's going to be hard. And I'm okay with that. Did you have a moment?
Yeah, I certainly did. I don't know if I can identify the exact time and date of that moment, but it was something that I mentioned before. Was when I lost a lot of friends, right? I lost a lot of male friends in particular when I was in my late teens and early 20s, because I started speaking out against them and started like standing up for people and started talking about things at a deep level. I was sick and tired of talking about football and booze and going to the pub and just doing your typical young bloke type of thing. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to have different conversations. And so that was when I realized, some people aren't ready for that. And particularly some men aren't ready for that. And the men that I was in my life at the time, they weren't ready for it. And so I did go through this period I felt quite isolated. And so that was kind of the recognition that I had of like, okay, this is going to be a tough journey. And then when I first started talking about things online as well, that was kind of another light bulb moment. When I first started talking about, sex and pleasure and sexuality online, many years ago now, the response I had to that was also quite similar. I had people like, go, what the hell are you talking about? Like, what's happened to you? Like just really thinking that something was wrong with me for having conversations about sexuality. And so that was also kind of another light bulb moment. And what's been interesting actually is 10 years down the track now, doing what it is that I do today, and having kind of pursued that, and it just not being this thing that I did once, but having it been a career and something that I'm now really quite known for, is a lot of those guys who unfriended me on social media or who stopped, hanging out with me in real life have, well, not a lot of them, but a good handful of them have messaged me, 10 years later being like, hey, man, just wanted to let you know I've been following you for like the last 10 years. They've never commented, they've never liked, they've never shared, they never interacted at all. But they send me a message to say, hey, I've just been following and I want to say thank you for either the work that you've done or the stuff that you share, or I listen to the podcast or something like that. Or they ask me for advice, right? Some of my bullies in high school, for example, 15 years ago, send me a message in the last couple of years saying, hey, I don't know who else to talk to. No one else in my life is, talking about this. Can you help me? And part of me, like the vindictive part of me is like, well, that's what you fucking get for being a bully to me in high school. But I don't hold that for very long. That's just kind of the knee-jerk reaction that I have. I try and be as compassionate as possible and realize that not a lot of people have someone that they can talk to about sexuality, and particularly a lot of men. I used to get like really like people used to send me messages, and people still send me messages all the time on social media, like talking about their life and their sexual issues and like their relationship struggles, and they just launch into it. They just like, I'll open up my social media messaging, and I'll get a message, and it'll just be someone who's just launched straight into like, hey Cam, here's what's going on for me, yada yada yada, my husband, my wife, whatever, like I'm having these issues. And I kind of go, whoa, like I just have to kind of take a double take and go, all right, that's a lot of information straight up, and like a lot of personal information. I don't know this person, and they don't know me. They know who I am on social media, and we have this kind of parasocial relationship. But like I used to get like really confused by why people would do that, right? And be like, I could take that information if I was any less, vigilant or vigilant with regards to like my work. I could just take that information and run with it, right? And I could be just some stranger on the internet that you've just unloaded all this personal information on. Thankfully, I'm not that person. But as I've kind of like gone down this career path, I've kind of realized the reason why people send me messages like that is because they don't have anyone else to talk to. There's almost like a desperation in those messages of like, finally, I found someone who's talking about this, who actually understands my experience. Oh my God, I've got to talk to this person, right? There's this sense of like, I've got nowhere else to go.
And it's not just the opportunity
it's
to
really
talk
an indicator
about
now for me
your topic either. You said right at the beginning, people are looking for people to talk to. I think what they're actually looking for is for somebody to listen. And listening is the antithesis of what goes on in the social media space, because social media is all about telling and showing and demonstrating rather than listening. So what I get in this 6-star space is clearly being 6-star is about being human first. So my quip is that we all put our duds on one leg at a time every single morning of the week. That's what happens. Then we go to work and we stamp something on our forehead. For you, it's sex coach. For me, it's marketing person. For Av, it's customer experience expert, or whatever the label is for today, and we tattoo it on our forehead. And when we do that, the language changes. But what underpins that role is the human being that put their duds on one leg at a time, and we're all common at that level. So the next thing that we go looking for is the whole Maslow thing. We want to be heard, and we want to belong to a family, a conversation, a team, a business, whatever it is. So what I get, Cam, is that the 6-starness of your work, it's about listening to understand, and then it's about supporting human beings to be the best version of themselves in a traditionally taboo part of life, the bit that you're not even allowed to show off about in social media. So I reckon you've got an absolute gold nugget of life and business ahead of you. because it's the guts of who we are.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. And I feel very listened to and heard from that reflection. So I really appreciate you.
And I'll echo that, ditto to what he said. Yeah. So Cam, do you feel like a trailblazer and a role model?
Yes. I mean, for the most part, some days I don't because I'm human and I have self-doubts. But for the most part, I do.
That's
And I
awesome.
really strive to be. So, yeah.
Well,
I do.
wow, I've just looked at the clock. Whilst we could just keep going, I'm conscious of the time. So we need to sort of wrap things up, unfortunately. But Cam, I would love to ask you, is there something you want to leave our listeners with? Maybe a little nugget or a tidbit or a piece of advice that they can take away and really think about right now?
Yeah. So this is my gold standard piece of advice, regardless of whether it's regarding sexuality or your business or whatever it is. But it's be curious. Just like lean into your curiosity. Like there's playfulness and there's awareness that comes from curiosity. But like the cornerstone of like all of it is just be curious about it. Like be curious about like your work, be curious about other people, be curious about yourself and just, follow that. You pull at the threads of your curiosity and see where it takes you. Like you'll be surprised. And like I said, whether that's in your relationship, in your sex life, whether it's in business and entrepreneurship, like just be curious about it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Cam. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I am so grateful that you showed up, that you came into my world when we got introduced. And you really are living and breathing a 6-star mentality and life in everything that you do. And you just happen to, be helping men in this very taboo kind of space, yet it's just so beautiful the way that you serve and the way you talk about it and the way you show up. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for who you are and thank you for being here.
Oh, ditto what she said, Cam.
Thanks for using your platform. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thanks for letting me have this conversation on here as well. It's really been really lovely.
It really has. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Cam.
Wow, so there you have it, folks. A beautiful episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And look, please leave us a review. Don't forget to rate the podcast, download the episode, and share it with your friends. Share this one with as many people as you can. This is one of those ones that you've got to share it around to get it out. And it can only be a good thing. The work that Cam does is helping humanity, ultimately. So enjoy. I wish you a fabulous week, and I will see you next week.